Hello and welcome to another live stream brought to you by NeuroHub Community. I'm David Gray-Hammond. I am the CEO and founder of NeuroHub Community, and today I want to deliver a live stream that will go through a webinar based on my lived experience of being an autistic addict and entering the world of recovery. I am happy to take questions. I'm happy for you to put things in the comments for me to answer. All I ask is that you're respectful. And obviously this could be a difficult topic for some people. So please do be aware that, I'm going to be talking about addiction and drug use, and it could be triggering for some of you. So if you need to take a moment to step away, do take a moment. And I look forward to sharing this all with you. If you're watching this not live and you're watching after, please do feel free to get in touch with NeuroHub Community if you have any questions or would like any support. You can contact me at david@neurohubcommunity.org. And we're always happy to help and support people. We do a lot of peer mentoring. We do family support work. We do mindfulness sessions. We have a peer support community that is thriving at the moment and full of people who love to support each other. It's got a chat space on the Heartbeat app. We do loads of Zoom meetups every week. We have 3 community connection sessions. We have a mindfulness-based peer support session. We have a fortnightly book reading session where we read books related to autism and things like that. We also have upcoming Dungeons and Dragons group we're going to be starting, where members of the NeuroHub community can engage in playing Dungeons and Dragons online with each other. But most importantly, next month, 14th to the 16th of August, we have our Autistic Mental Health Conference. And if you'd like to find out more about that, you can see along the bottom, neurohubcommunity.org. You will see it. It's one of the first things on the website. So please do check out that conference. And I know the tickets are quite expensive. There is a discount code for members of our community to knock a third off. And if you are struggling financially, get in touch with me at david@neurohubcommunity.org, and we will sort out a price that you can afford so that you can access the conference. This conference is free, but if you'd like to donate to it, you can either donate at the link below, which is bit.ly/neurohub-live, or you can scan the QR code in the top right corner. Both of those will allow you to donate to this live stream. But without further ado, I would like to get started on sharing this webinar with you on my lived experience of being an autistic addict and entering recovery. It's a very personal journey, and I hope that it is something that you can all relate to. Please do feel free to ask questions in the comments, and please do let me know what you think. And I hope this is something that is really important for all of us. I'm going to remove myself from the... Oh, I'm not going to remove myself. I'm going to turn off my camera, and then we're going to get started. So, as I mentioned, this talk will include direct references to drug use, overdose, hospital admission, and the failures of mental health and substance use services. Nothing is included for shock value. Step out and back in as you need to. As I said earlier, I'm the founder of NeuroHub Community. I'm a multiply neurodivergent practitioner, researcher, and writer. I'm 10 years in recovery from drug addiction. And everything I'll say today sits underneath the work that NeuroHub Community does now. I have spent many years doing peer support and mentoring for neurodivergent people, particularly those with more complex mental health needs. I myself am autistic, ADHD, and schizophrenic, and I use my lived experience and my professional knowledge to support people toward better outcomes. I'd like to start by talking about the ecosystemic model. The ecosystemic model is something we talk about a lot at NeuroHub. It's the basis of how we understand supporting neurodivergent and in particular autistic people. It's quite complex, but for the ease of explaining, I've broken it down here into three kind of categories. At the center of everything in the human ecosystem we exist within is our body mind. This is our autistic body and mind as one inseparable system. It's not a mind housed in a malfunctioning body. It's the environment that we live in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we can never leave it or escape it. So when we're thinking about the environments we live in, we have to think about the experiences we are having through our body mind. But that body mind exists within an immediate environment. This could be family, schools, services, peer groups, spaces a person actually has to survive inside day to day. And with this, you have to think about the sensory environment. You have to think about how predictable the environment is, the physical layout of the environment. Is it physically accessible? Are there things in that immediate environment, such as conflict with other people in that environment? Or is there conflict between people in our immediate environment who we're connected to? Because sometimes, even if we're not in conflict with people, other people being in conflict in our immediate environment can impact us. But all of this is very much controlled by the power structures. These are the institutions, the policies, the diagnostic systems, the healthcare systems, the political landscape, the economic landscape. All of these things shape the immediate environment and what it's allowed to offer, and they shape how we interpret and view our body mind and the body mind of others. It affects everything from our relational environment with other people through to whether environments have accessible lighting or accessible features such as ramps and things like that. All of these institutional issues impact the entire ecosystem and therefore kind of have an element of power over things. Now, Deleuze and Guattari would say that this is the arborification of the ecosystem. So if you imagine the ecosystem as a rhizomatic mycelium, a network of things that are interconnected, but no one point is more important than the other, power structures attempt to turn that network into more of a tree, where they are the central trunk that everything passes through and has power over the entire organism. Part of being neurodivergent is resisting that arborification and maintaining the mycelium, the rhizome, the interconnected system that no one point or person has more power than another. So now we've covered that, I want to talk about what I was like before the drugs, because this is an important part of the conversation. I grew up unseen. I had no diagnosis. Every time my mother tried to get me diagnosed autistic, she was told that she was an over-anxious mother with too much knowledge of the subject. I had no language for what was happening within my body mind. I had no way of understanding who I was or what was going on with me. I just felt like a broken individual, like a broken version of a neurotypical. I was a child who just didn't fit in classrooms. I had friendship groups that were built for a different kind of nervous system. My neurocognitive style was the square peg trying to fit into a round hole. Years of masking myself and containing myself and trying to fit into that round hole led to issues that people simply didn't see because I'd become so adept at concealing the things I was struggling with. So underneath the isolation was an undiagnosed psychotic condition. It ran quietly and then not so quietly and was misread by everyone around me, including myself, as personality, as drama, as difficult behavior. And in fact, at one point I was diagnosed with a personality disorder and told that I was inherently sociopathic. The truth is I was experiencing schizophrenia from my late teens onwards, and all of my behaviors that had me diagnosed with a personality disorder were related to the drug use that was part of how I coped with being schizophrenic. So first contact. Drugs found what services never addressed. The first time I used, something that had been so loud, like a cacophony of noise, went quiet. And that quiet wasn't a red flag to me. It was a moment of relief. I drank alcohol, I smoked weed. Those two things were where I started, and I found so much relief in them. And to be honest, I started to question the way the world had taught me, because I'd been taught that these things were bad to do and they would always cause harm. When I discovered they didn't cause as much harm as I'd been told, I lost my trust in what I had learned about why I shouldn't touch illegal substances. And that was how I took a step towards using harder substances, not because I was, entering the gateway through cannabis use, but because so much of what we teach around drug use is focused on abstinence and fear. And I felt like I'd been lied to, so I was more willing to explore harder drugs. And so when I started drinking and getting relief from spirits and cannabis, I also then started using harder substances because I felt that I'd been lied to. And the truth is, those harder substances did come with a lot of dangers, but I didn't engage with the idea of those dangers, because where I'd been lied to about things like cannabis, I lost all trust in what I had learned. Now, I feel it's important here to talk about community and identity, because these are factors in my drug use and the drug use of many other autistic addicts. As I mentioned, I had experienced years of chronic isolation before I ever touched a drug. It wasn't shyness, and it wasn't that I preferred solitude. There was a sustained absence of anywhere I fit. As I said earlier, I was the square peg trying to enter the round hole, and I found it impossible to find my place in the world. I felt completely disconnected from the world around me. I felt alone, and in my late teens, I was experiencing psychosis, although I didn't have the language for it, or being autistic or being ADHD. And so without that language, without that community, I felt like I was just suffering on my own, no matter how many people were in the room. So I went looking for my tribe, my neurokin, and drugs and alcohol, the scenes there, gave me something that no clinic ever had or could. It gave me instant community. We had shared rituals, we had shared language, shared interest. People wanted me in the room. I was a part of something. There was a belonging in the gang life I was involved in. There was a belonging in the drug use I was involved in. It was okay to be weird because we were all off our heads. We were all heavily under the influence. And so no one batted an eyelid when I acted authentically like an autistic person, because I was David the drug addict. People didn't ask, why are you so weird? They asked, why are you still alive? And back then I thought that was an accolade. It is only since, in my 10 years of recovery, that I have realized people were genuinely concerned for what I was doing to myself. But it's identity, not just a substance. The culture around drug use helped me just as much as those chemicals did. It was the first time I had an identity that other people recognized and shared. Ecosystemically speaking, it was an immediate environment that finally offered the belonging that mainstream social spaces had withheld for years. I felt like I'd finally found my place in the world. These people wanted me here. These people saw value in me. These people had the same interests as me, and I could be myself for the first time ever. And this culture that evolves around drug use, because there is a genuine counterculture in drug use circles. It wasn't just people being silly or stupid or idiotic like we're told. We had deep conversations. We'd put the world to rights. We had ideas and thoughts that have influenced the work I do now. They were really profound thoughts and discussions. But that was all part of the drug use culture, because you have those discussions when you have nothing else in your life but drug use and the culture surrounding it. And I didn't realize at the time that that belonging was somewhat of a codependency and not healthy. I think now we should explore the sensory logic of drug use because, again, this is a very important factor. So if you've not heard of interoception, it's one of the 8 senses. So we're taught about 5 senses: touch, taste, hearing, smell, and eyesight, our visual sensory system. But there are 3 more, which is interoception, proprioception, and your vestibular sense. I want to focus on interoception, which is the sense of what's happening inside your own body, because many autistic people experience it differently, sometimes muted, sometimes overwhelming, rarely straightforward. This interoceptive system plays a role in autistic people who experience alexithymia, that inability to understand and articulate your emotional state. It also plays a role in why we may not appear to perform the level of pain we're actually experiencing, because those internal sensations are different for us and the way we respond to them are different. But we can stim off of interoception, and for me, drug use was a stim. It wasn't just that I was chasing a high for recreation. I was stimming off the interoceptive impact of the drug itself, the rush, the pressure change, the specific internal sensation that each substance produced, the physical interoceptive feeling of euphoria in my body. Those were the things that I was chasing. That was what I was interested in. That was what was bringing me the relief, that interoceptive moment where the world just went quiet and it was just me connected to the world in a way that didn't hurt. And this leads me on to talking about psychonauts, because I treated myself as a science experiment. And believe it or not, psychonaut culture is a real online culture. So the psychonaut community is a subculture built around deliberate, documented exploration of psychoactive experience. I found others who treated their own use with the same rigor I wanted to bring to mine. This was people experimenting with substances and recording what happened. I had journals that explored what substance I'd taken, what quantity I was taking it in, the combinations I had taken, the timing, the effects were logged in detail, tracked over months and years. What looked like chaotic drug use was not chaos. For me, it was a methodology. I had stacks and stacks of information that sadly I threw away when I entered recovery, and I wish I hadn't, because there were some really profound records of how drugs impacted me as an individual, and I put a lot of detail into them. But back then I was pushing the edges. I wanted to try and find out how far my own experience could go, because finally I was in control of my mind. I could experience the things I wanted to experience. I was not living in a schizophrenic body mind that enforced experiences on me. I could take a chemical and experience what I wanted to experience. Curiosity and dysregulation were not 2 separate things happening at once. They were the same process wearing 2 names. I was able to emotionally regulate myself while satiating my curiosity of how far things would go. But sadly, it got to the point where the only thing I was seeking was oblivion. I wanted to experience what it was like to no longer exist. And this is why we need to talk about falling through the gap, because I wanted to recover. I realized the state I was in. I realized what drug use was doing to me. And I realized I was a 26-year-old man who was facing not surviving another year. My family were planning my funeral. I had multiple hospital visits, which I'll discuss in a moment. And one day I just had this moment where I was like, I need to do something about this. And so I tried to approach help. The problem was mental health services would say, we can't support you whilst you're on drugs. But the substance use services would say, we can't help until your mental health is addressed. So I was a schizophrenic, autistic, and ADHD drug addict with no diagnoses who could not get support from anyone, because both of them were saying I was too complex for their service. But they were the 2 services that needed to work together in order to support me and help me find the recovery I was looking for. There were 2 services, 2 sets of conditions, one person and no door that opened. And this is what happens when power structures design services around single separable diagnoses and hand the cost of that design to the person who doesn't fit it. Going back to that ecosystemic model, this is how institutional policies block autistic people, people who are neurologically complex, from accessing the support they need. I was falling through the gap because no one wanted to grab my hand. Eventually, someone did, but it took a long time and it took a lot of fighting. And honestly, in addiction, the last thing you want to have to do is fight any further for your own survival, because it is one of the most exhausting experiences you will ever have. But as I mentioned, I was admitted to hospital a lot because of my drug use, and I want to talk about some of the numbers here. In my final year of drug use, I had over 60 hospital admissions, more than one a week. Every admission was to treat an overdose. None of them treated what caused it, which was my unmet needs, my undiagnosed autism, my undiagnosed ADHD, my undiagnosed schizophrenia. Had those things have been addressed and identified and supported earlier in my life, I needn't have had over 60 hospital admissions in a single year, because I cannot get it over to you, because so many people look poorly at people who experience drug overdoses. But I want to say to you now, none of us are having a good time when we are in the back of an ambulance being given naloxone to save our life. The experience of being resuscitated is not a pleasant experience. It is traumatic, and no one wants to have to go to hospital for an overdose, but no one was willing to treat the underlying unmet needs that led to my hospital admissions. And I want you to hold that thought for a moment, because this is the most important thing I can tell you. Addiction arises where there are unmet needs. We become addicts to fulfill the needs that no one else is fulfilling for us. If you meet the needs of people, you are much less likely to see people suffering at the hands of drug and alcohol addiction. And so I want to talk about what was offered and what didn't fit, because there were two things in particular that were used on me as a schizophrenic addict that were wholly inappropriate and did not help me in my exploration of how to get into recovery. The first was cognitive behavioral therapy. It's an NHS standard. It was offered repeatedly, as it is to many autistic people. And what they asked me to do was restructure my thinking about distress that was never generated by faulty thoughts. It located the problem in me when the problem was never only mine to relocate. My psychosis, my distress, my addiction was a downstream issue. The reason I was experiencing those things was because of things in the broader human ecosystem that had happened to me that led to me having those experiences. But CBT so often looked at my autistic neurocognitive style, my ADHD neurocognitive style, my schizophrenic neurocognitive style, the combination of all of those, my individual way of being in the world. CBT saw that as faulty thinking, as inappropriate, as needing to be changed. And it felt like I was being medically gaslit. Now, I appreciate there are CBT therapists out there who feel that they do it better, that they don't do those sorts of things. But you have to be aware that when you have any kind of behavioral-based treatment, it does have an element of invalidating neurodivergent people's experience, because it was never designed with us in mind, even though we are the people that are usually accessing it. But the other thing that was offered to me, and I admit there are people who it's been very successful for, but for me it was not, was the 12-step programs like Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Drug Addicts Anonymous. It was offered repeatedly. It was group-based. It was very socially demanding. Lots of handshaking, lots of hugging, lots of standing up in front of people and bearing your soul to them. It was often spiritually or religiously framed. Although they said there was no need to believe in any religious idea, we always said a Christian prayer at the end of the session. I remember it perfectly. We would say, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I, as a neurodivergent individual of a left political leaning could not accept that prayer. First of all, I wasn't even sure I believed in God, still aren't. I'm very agnostic. You'll probably see that discussion when I do the live stream with my mother on Monday, who is a priest. But there was a lot of religious and spiritual stuff in that. And I fundamentally cannot accept that there are things I cannot change. I believe as a neurodivergent activist that if I don't agree with something, I will never accept that I can't change it. And even if it means fighting in vain, I will fight just to show that there are people willing to do so. But that was framed in the 12-step program as being egotistical and needing to be eliminated. It was built around a model of surrender that assumed a shared social and cognitive style. I remember being agoraphobic and having my sponsor tell me that I couldn't really be agoraphobic because I could get taxis out to meetings. They didn't understand how agoraphobia worked. I could barely leave the house, and in fact, for a year solid, I didn't even go in my back garden. But I was invalidated frequently. The whole thing was just not accessible by default for me or many of the autistic people I've met, because, again, the 12-step program was not necessarily designed to consider autistic people or ADHD people, or in my case, schizophrenic people, or, as the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous would call us, emotionally disturbed people, which I also took umbrage with. I do not agree with that statement. And if we're going to run a fixed program to support autistic people, neurodivergent people experiencing addiction, we have to do more than set out this clean and neat 12 steps that center us as entirely the problem and us as needing to apologize for the things that happen to us. It's not enough to blame the person, because the shame cycle is real and it will just reinforce drug use. And so I built my own path. There was no pathway that existed for me, so I built one. My body-mind, I addressed directly. I addressed the sensory and psychiatric needs that drug use had been managing all along. I forced my way into the psychiatric space, and I got treatment for my mental health. In the immediate environment, I rebuilt deliberately. I rebuilt relationships. I rebuilt routines. I rebuilt the things that offered belonging without requiring use. And I found the autistic community, which was the single most important moment of my recovery. And I will get into that more in a moment. But in the power structures, I refused on their own terms. I stopped waiting for the system built around single diagnoses to make room for me, and I made room for myself. And now in my work, I do my best to make room for others. I'm 10 years in recovery, not because a service finally worked, but because I stopped waiting for one to work. And so if there are any practitioners watching this, I want you to take these points away. Stop asking which condition to treat first. Start asking what the body-mind is regulating, what the immediate environment is withholding, and what the system is designed to exclude. Meet the unmet needs, and substance use will begin to stabilize. For me, that unmet need was community connection. And we know from research that community connection improves the mental health of autistic people. The single most important moment, as I said, of my life was meeting other autistic people, accessing the neurodiversity movement. Having space to share with other autistic people online is the reason I've got 10 years into recovery. It's the reason I'm still here today. And it's the reason I do the work I do, because I owe this community my life. Thank you for listening to this. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to take them now, and I will answer them. I don't know if anyone's actually watching this live, but if you are, please pop some questions in the chat and we'll talk about them. Just put them in the comment space and they'll pop up on my screen. I will just prepare to come back on. So, hello everyone. Does anyone have any questions? Anything they want to ask me? Anything that is there? You can even just, comment with how you relate to what I said. Um, yeah, there is an element of treat the symptoms, not the cause, which I find very difficult, because I feel that particularly in psychiatric settings, we need psychiatry, we need psychological professionals to be engaging in what I would say is social advocacy as well as medical treatment, because it's not enough to simply put out fires. You've got to stop fires from being set in the first place. So someone's asking our thoughts on medicinal cannabis for emotional regulation, stress management, etc. Let me start by saying, and most people are surprised to hear this, I am fully in support of the full legalization of cannabis. I don't believe it should just be available for medical use. I believe it should be fully legalized. If we let people drink beer and vodka and things like that, we should be letting people have a joint if they want to have a joint to relax, because it is demonstrably safer than alcohol. It's just not as seen as financially lucrative as alcohol, because the full legalization of cannabis opens up a world of products that would cause a lot of very rich people to lose money, and I find that fundamentally frustrating. Medicinal cannabis I have seen help so many people, and I've even seen it help people in my situation to stay in recovery and stay away from the source of their addiction. There is growing evidence that it is good for emotional regulation, it is good for stress management, it's good for pain management, and we've known for a long time it's particularly effective for the treatment of treatment-resistant epilepsy. There are so many things that medicinal cannabis can help with, and I find it frustrating that in the UK you can only access it privately, and it's behind so many hoops you have to jump through. Personally, for me, I looked into medicinal cannabis, but when they did their list of questions, because I've experienced psychosis, they always said no to me. But it's annoying for me because I know psychotic people with similar diagnoses to me who have, they have accessed medicinal cannabis through research projects and found it way more effective for treating their schizophrenia than antipsychotic medication. And that's really exciting to me, because I take antipsychotic medication and the harm it has done my body is horrific. I've gained loads of weight. I'm a very big guy. Most people who've seen me know that. And also, I experience a lot of chronic pain because I'm overweight and I've developed arthritis. The medication I take made me diabetic, caused me high cholesterol that I have to take medication for. And had medicinal cannabis been an option for me, I absolutely would have taken it, because half of these problems, half of the ways my body is now failing me. I have cirrhosis of the liver. It was diagnosed this year at 10 years in recovery. And it's not just because I was an alcoholic and a drug addict. It's because the psychiatric medications I take are toxic to my liver. So it does annoy me that things like medicinal cannabis are so heavily gatekept, when we can see that the harms associated with cannabis are so much less than a lot of the mainstream medications used. And I do believe medicinal cannabis should be far, far more available. And I believe it should be available on the NHS, not just through private clinics. And someone commented here, Carlin Moonstar said, I said autism and I was refused. This is another problem as well. When it comes to medicinal cannabis, so many of us are refused on the basis of single diagnoses. They just generalize diagnoses. They don't look at our individual cases very well. And this is why I think we need to push for medicinal cannabis to enter the mainstream healthcare systems of our countries. Because I think if it was more mainstream and better regulated, more people would have access to it. But private clinics, you've got to remember, they're operating off of a profit-based project. So they don't want to take risks that could result in them being sued and them losing money. So they're far more strict with how they use it. But there is so much evidence that medicinal cannabis is really, really helpful. And I do think it's an important thing for addicts to have access to when they're entering recovery. It doesn't work for everyone, but on a case-by-case basis, I do think it's something that should be considered for people, because I have seen it save lives. And if anyone else has any questions, feel free to pop them in. Anything about addiction recovery and things like that. Don't forget, I also have my book, Unusual Medicine, which explores my experiences of addiction and being autistic. It's a couple of years old now. I'd probably write some different things if I was writing it today, but I think it still stands. I see that DJL Debbie wrote thank you in total agreement with you. I'm glad. But yeah, if anyone else has any questions, feel free to ask them, and I will answer them as best I can. I will give people a minute in case they're typing in comment sections or anything. But, I think one of the things I really want to do through my work is support more people to enter recovery, to use that lived experience I've got to help more people, because I went through years of suffering and I don't want it to be for nothing. I want to be able to help people access the world in the way I've been able to, because it's been so important to me to see a world where I didn't have to live life according to my addiction, because life has been intense and difficult, and I don't want other autistic people to go through that. I want to help. Okay, well, it seems like no one else in the comment section has any questions. So what I want to say is thank you, everyone who has joined this today. Remember, you can donate to this live stream either at bit.ly/neurohub-live or by scanning the QR code in the corner. You don't have to donate, but if you can, it really helps us keep doing this kind of work and offering these free webinars. And remember to check out the Autistic Mental Health Conference. Tickets start from about £50. And if paying for a ticket is financially inaccessible for you, please get in contact with me at NeuroHub. So my email is david@neurohubcommunity.org. I will put that on the screen right now so that you can see it. Hang on. So if you have any questions or things are or the conference is inaccessible financially for you, email me at david@neurohubcommunity.org, and we will sort out a price that is financially accessible for you, because I want people to be able to access this sort of thing. And please do go and check out our blogs on our neurohubcommunity.org website. Earlier today, I published one on autism and gang culture. And please, if you see our stuff out there, share it, pass it around. Please feel free in a moment, if you're watching this on YouTube, take the link to this YouTube, which will remain, the recording will remain. Share it out across social media, because I want us to reach more people. I want to help more people. And that's why I share this story with people. I see DJ Debbie says, thanks, hats off to you, David. Thank you for being here and being a part of this live stream. It's really important to me that we are all together and working together. And as I said, remember, you can donate to this live stream to help support the work that we're doing. And that donation link works whether you're watching this live or watching the recording. But thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for joining in the comments. And hopefully there'll be more people on Monday at our next live stream. But in the meantime, take care, and I will see you all later. Goodbye.